While I was traveling with Lucas, Jonathan had brought a woman into the house. Sarah urged Jonathan to be with this woman.
I can't remarry her. She's the CEO's secretary. If this gets out, I'll lose my job. But if those two got into an accident or something and ended up dead, that'd be a different story. Honestly, they're such a nuisance. We really don't need that ugly wife or that idiot son around here anymore.
Exactly. Lucas is nothing like me. He's a low-educated fool. We don't need him. I wish they'd both just disappear forever.
Their conversation made my blood boil. I would never forgive these two. Lucas and I exchanged a glance and left the house silently. And so, like making a U-turn, we retraced our steps back down the road. I'll make those two pay. First, I needed to gather evidence. I worked with Lucas to hire a private investigator and began looking into Jonathan's behavior. I'm Monica, a 48-year-old stay-at-home mom. Right now, I live with my husband and our 2 children, making us a family of 4. My husband, Jonathan, graduated from a top university and works at a prestigious company. He's what I call a high achiever. On the other hand, I graduated from a community college and worked as a dietitian for about 2 years. However, after Jonathan and I had a match-made marriage, I stopped working altogether. Back when we got married 26 years ago, some women continued working after marriage, but I wanted to dedicate myself to my family and be a full-time homemaker. Jonathan felt the same way, and we both agreed on this path. A year after we got married, I gave birth to a baby boy. We named our first son Lucas. Since he was our first child, Jonathan doted on him. 2 years later, I gave birth to our second child, a baby girl. We were both thrilled because we'd been saying it'd be great to have a girl next. Jonathan was completely smitten with his baby daughter. Looking back, that might have been the happiest time in our lives. But things started to change between us after that. We named our daughter Sarah. As Sarah grew older, she started to resemble Jonathan more and more. By the time she was about a year old, the resemblance was uncanny.
Sarah stood up. Sarah's walking. Sarah just called me Daddy.
His loving, hands-on parenting style is heartwarming to see. However, this affection was only directed at Sarah. By the time Lucas turned 3, Jonathan seemed to have lost interest in him entirely. Maybe it's natural for a father to find his daughter more endearing. I thought it was just a phase while she was little. But starting around the time Sarah turned 3 and became more aware, Jonathan's excessive doting only escalated. Sarah resembled Jonathan, not just in looks, but also in intelligence. Even before being taught, she started writing letters on her own and showed an interest in numbers. Seeing this, Jonathan was overjoyed. Overcome with excitement, he began teaching her addition and subtraction one after another. Whenever she was praised, Sarah would flash a proud smile. As her mother, I should have been happy about this. But at the same time, I started worrying about Lucas. Lucas was 5 years old. It was an age when he needed to spend more time playing with his dad, but Jonathan didn't pay any attention to him at all. Gradually, Lucas began to shut himself off from Jonathan. Instead, he started standing by my side in the kitchen, quietly watching me cook. At just 5, he seemed to develop an interest in cooking. I bought him a child-safe plastic knife. When I gave it to him, his face lit up with excitement as he mimicked me, cutting vegetables and fruit. But I didn't want to show favoritism toward Lucas, so whenever he started cooking, I always called Sarah into the kitchen too. However, Sarah would look uninterested and say,
Mom, why did you call me?
Hearing this, Jonathan would show up in the kitchen, glare at me, and yell,
Hey, what if Sarah cuts her finger? Don't make her do something so dangerous. She's only 3.
I'm sorry. I just wanted her to watch. But Jonathan scooped Sarah up in his arms and quickly carried her to the living room. He made a point of saying loudly, It's dangerous to stay here, in a gentle tone as he reassured Sarah. Lucas watched them with sad eyes. What should I say to comfort him? Jonathan's blatant favoritism for Sarah was becoming more obvious. If things continued like this, Lucas might end up with a deep emotional scar. I wanted to raise both siblings with equal love and care. For that, I needed Jonathan's cooperation. I struggled to find a solution. However, my concerns remained unresolved as time went by. Even after starting elementary school, Sarah felt a sense of superiority from being taught and praised by Jonathan. She went on to attend a private middle and high school, and eventually enrolled in the prestigious university Jonathan had attended. By then, Sarah had completely started looking down on me. Now, she and Jonathan treat me like a housemaid.
Hey, I told you I'd be leaving for school 30 minutes earlier today. Why isn't breakfast ready? Hurry up, you idiot.
Sarah always orders me around like this. Last night, she came home late from a party with her classmates, so I'm sure she didn't mention anything about this morning's schedule. I didn't hear anything about that. When did you say it?
Stop making excuses. Just get breakfast ready.
No matter what I say, Jonathan always takes Sarah's side and defends her. I have no choice but to hurriedly prepare breakfast, while the two of them sit at the table leisurely watching TV. When I serve the food, they both look displeased and complain about how I couldn't make anything better. For the record, Lucas left home 3 years ago after graduating high school, saying he wanted to become a chef. He was the only one who cared for me, and without him, there's no one left in this house who's on my side. However, ever since he was little, Lucas has loved cooking, and now he's training hard, determined to become a top chef. Thinking about that motivates me to keep pushing myself as well. Sarah may be academically gifted, but she's incapable of doing anything else. I've tried to involve her in household chores, but every time I did, Jonathan would interfere. The differences in our parenting values have created a deep rift between Jonathan and me, and now our entire family feels fractured. Of course, I've thought about divorce. While I can't ignore the fact that I bear some responsibility for the way Sarah has turned out, I can't let my family fall apart just because of my poor relationship with Jonathan. So, I've come to accept this as an ordinary family issue and decided to continue living like this. After graduating university, Sarah got a job at the same company as Jonathan. To the outside world, we probably look like a happy family with a successful daughter following in her father's footsteps. But the truth is, Jonathan and Sarah's treatment of me has gotten even worse. Being ordered around by the two of them, both working at prestigious companies, makes me feel less like a housemaid and more like a slave. I've become gaunt, and my hair has started graying and falling out badly. Even though we're financially stable, I'm so busy that I don't have time for skincare or trips to the salon. Even when no one else is home, I'm told to clean every corner of the house thoroughly and polish every single glass for their evening drinks. They also nitpick every detail about the laundry and meal preparations. Every day, I work until I'm utterly exhausted. Then one day, during a weekday afternoon, Lucas came back home.
Mom, I'm home. Actually, this is the first time I've been able to take a proper break since becoming a chef. So, to learn more about the culinary world, I've booked a 3-night stay at a hotel as a guest. It's for 2 people, so why don't you come with me?
Lucas said happily. Since it was a weekday afternoon, I was the only one at home, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy about him making such a decision without consulting anyone. If Jonathan and Sarah find out about me going on a trip with you, they might get angry. When I expressed my concern, Lucas looked worried and responded,
That's why I waited for a time when neither of them would be around to ask you. Remember about a month ago when I came home just to pick up some things? I saw how exhausted you looked back then.
Apparently, he had noticed. Lucas had realized how much mistreatment I'd been enduring from the 2 of them since he left. Concerned for me, he had made plans so I could leave the house for just 3 days.
Don't worry, I'll call Dad later and smooth things over. Mom, you need to take a break every once in a while.
I was so touched by Lucas' thoughtfulness that I couldn't hold back my tears. After explaining the plan, Lucas quickly left to return to work. Honestly, I still felt uneasy. Will Jonathan really allow this? But for now, I decided to trust Lucas' words. That night, it seemed Jonathan had received a call from Lucas, as he immediately asked me about the hotel. However, contrary to my worries, neither Jonathan nor Sarah seemed to care at all.
Lucas told me about it. He even mentioned the destination. Oh, that hotel? Sarah and I have been to all the luxury hotels around here, so we know it. Honestly, I doubt people like you, who can't even appreciate fine taste, would get much out of it.
Exactly. Well, I suppose we can let you slack off from housework for 3 days.
While they didn't oppose my staying at the hotel, their usual snide tone was still present. Even so, I accepted their remarks without reacting. Thank you. In that case, I'll take you up on your kind offer and take 3 days off. It felt like asking a boss for vacation time, but with those 2, such politeness was necessary. If anything, I had expected them to show more displeasure about me leaving the house, but I found it odd how easily they approved. It felt a bit strange, but I decided not to overthink it and enjoy the rare opportunity for my trip. And during those 3 days at the hotel, I spent peaceful and relaxing time with Lucas. It's been decades since I've had such a luxurious time without worrying about chores or being criticized by anyone. Feeling refreshed and in a good mood after shaking off my daily exhaustion, I returned home with Lucas, who still had 1 day of vacation left. I thought he could rest at home for a day since the trip had been tiring for him. It was late at night, so I figured Jonathan and Sarah were probably already asleep. With that in mind, I quietly opened the front door and entered the house, careful not to make any noise. But then, I heard Jonathan and Sarah laughing in the living room. Realizing they were still awake, I decided to step in, but just as I was about to, their conversation stopped me in my tracks.
So, what do you think of her? Thanks to that ugly wife being gone, she cleaned and even cooked for us yesterday and today. She's a real catch, isn't she?
Totally. She's way better at cooking than her ugly maid. And she even taught me some makeup tricks. Dad, why don't you just be with her instead?
Her? Who are they talking about? Could Jonathan be having an affair? I wanted to rush in and confront them immediately, but Lucas grabbed my arm from behind and held me back.
Don't. Let's wait a little longer and catch him red-handed.
Lucas whispered softly. He was right. so I stayed put and listened carefully.
I can't remarry her. She's the CO's secretary. If this gets out, I'll lose my job. But if those two got into an accident or something and ended up dead, that'd be a different story. Honestly, they're such a nuisance. We really don't need that ugly wife or that idiot son around here anymore.
Exactly. Lucas is nothing like me. He's a low-educated fool. We don't need him. I wish they'd both just disappear forever.
How could they? Their conversation made my blood boil. I would never forgive these two. Lucas and I exchanged a glance and left the house silently. And so, like making a U-turn, we retraced our steps back down the road. Our destination was Lucas' apartment in the neighboring town, where he lived alone. For now, I'll stay there and make those two pay. First, I needed to gather evidence. The woman Jonathan had brought into our home was, as he mentioned, the CO's secretary, and he was worried about the company finding out. He was most likely having an affair. Working with Lucas, I hired a private investigator to look into Jonathan's activities. Once I've gathered all the evidence, I'll slap him with divorce papers. With that thought in mind, I steadily began making preparations. One day, about 6 months later, while having breakfast with Lucas and watching a morning news program on TV, a shocking piece of news caught my attention. There had been a fire at our house just moments ago. Lucas and I rushed over, but fortunately, the damage was minimal, and the fire had been quickly extinguished. It was covered on a local news segment, likely because it was a minor incident, but still caught attention. However, Sarah was clearly terrified and was crying her eyes out. As soon as she spotted me, she rushed over in a panic.
Mom, it was so scary.
What happened, Sarah? You're still in your pajamas. Sarah clung to me, sobbing, her pajamas rumpled and her hair a mess. When I asked for details, Sarah explained that she woke up feeling hungry and decided to heat something from the fridge in the microwave. However, she put it in the microwave still wrapped in aluminum foil and turned it on. Not knowing how long to heat it, she set the timer for a full 10 minutes. Naturally, the microwave caught fire, and it turned into a minor blaze. Sarah didn't even know how to use a microwave, let alone cook. She had never lifted a finger to help around the house, leaving everything to me, so it was no surprise. Through her tears, Sarah said,
Mom, I had no idea housework was this hard. I can't do something this annoying, so please come back now. And why did you suddenly leave home anyway? It doesn't make any sense.
That's right, Monica. I thought you'd come back after your trip, but you haven't contacted us since. You even ignored my calls. What's the meaning of this?
Jonathan and Sarah glared at me with intense fury. These two should have been struggling in my absence, yet they showed no signs of remorse. Deciding they no longer deserved my sympathy, I stood my ground and responded in a firm tone. Why don't you think about that yourselves? In any case, I have no intention of returning to this house. I'll be back with divorce papers, so be prepared.
Wait, divorce? What are you thinking? I won't allow it.
Jonathan yelled angrily, but I ignored him and left with Lucas. Even as they shouted, "Wait a minute," we didn't look back. The next day, I returned to the house with divorce papers and a bag full of documents. Over the past 6 months, I had gathered plenty of evidence. No matter how much Jonathan tried to explain, I was confident I could prove his infidelity. When I arrived at the house, I didn't bother ringing the doorbell. I unlocked the door and walked in. But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. The house was overflowing with clutter, leaving no place to step. and a foul odor filled every room. Even though it was the middle of winter, flies were buzzing around everywhere. Has Jonathan's mistress not been here since then? As I stood there thinking, Jonathan appeared from the back of the house.
You finally come back. But let me tell you, I'm not agreeing to a divorce. If you insist on separating, you'll have to pay me alimony as punishment for abandoning the house and leaving us.
That's not going to happen. I have all this evidence of your affair, gathered by a private investigator. Furious at his unreasonable demands, I pulled out a stack of documents and photos from the envelope and scattered them in front of Jonathan. Among them were pictures of him arm in arm with a beautiful woman, walking out of a hotel. Jonathan picked up one of the photos and burst into loud laughter.
And what about it? Compared to you irresponsibly abandoning your family, this is nothing. I'm a senior manager at my company. It's only natural that young coworkers look up to me.
Oh, really? Can you honestly call that admiration, Dad?
Lucas, what are you doing here?
Jonathan was shocked to see Lucas suddenly appear, especially since it was a holiday and Lucas was supposed to be busy at work. I was just as surprised, never expecting Lucas to show up, and I couldn't help but wonder why he had come. Lucas, why are you here? Isn't the restaurant busy today?
Mom, I can't just focus on work when something this big is happening. I've moved up the ranks so I can take emergency leave when needed.
With a proud expression, Lucas pulled his phone out of his pocket. He then showed Jonathan a video playing on the screen. The moment Jonathan saw it, his face turned pale, and he asked,
When was this filmed?
The video showed Jonathan having a conversation with his mistress at an upscale restaurant. It appeared Jonathan had invited her, but the woman seemed reluctant. As I listened, it became clear that Jonathan was trying to convince her to come back to his house to clean again. However, she was disgusted after seeing the state of the house, which hadn't been cleaned in months. She firmly stated that she never wanted to set foot in Jonathan's house again. Even so, Jonathan persistently pressured her. Eventually, she snapped, yelling, "Shut up," before shaking off Jonathan's desperate grip on her arm and storming out. Watching the entire scene, it was clear just how infatuated Jonathan was with her. This was undeniable proof of his affair. Despite looking embarrassed by his pathetic behavior being exposed, Jonathan turned to Lucas and started questioning him.
How on earth did you record this? That restaurant is one of the most exclusive in the area. Someone like you wouldn't even be able to set foot inside.
Lucas and I burst out laughing.
Really? Don't you even know where I work, Dad? I'm a chef at that restaurant now.
That's right. Jonathan, you've been so focused on Sarah that you didn't even bother to find out where your accomplished son is working.
Wait, Lucas works at such a high-end place? No way.
Yes, Lucas had been recognized for his experience and training at various establishments and was now a chef at the finest restaurant in the region. It turns out that this restaurant is occasionally used by underground organizations, so security cameras are installed in the private dining rooms as a precaution. The video was captured by one of those cameras in the private room where they were dining. Lucas had asked the restaurant manager to save the footage to his phone so it could be used as evidence in case the divorce proceedings between Jonathan and me became contentious. The investigator confirmed that Jonathan's mistress was indeed the CEO secretary at his company. They had been secretly seeing each other for over 2 years, careful not to let the company find out. Faced with undeniable evidence, Jonathan slumped in defeat.
Damn it. I was planning to divorce Monica after making her pay alimony for irresponsibly abandoning the house. Then I could have hired cleaners and gotten back together with her.
I was dumbfounded by Jonathan's audacity. Even though he had admitted defeat, his blatant honesty was appalling. Who would ever pay alimony to such a man? Anyway, you're the one who's going to pay alimony. Now that you've come to terms with it, sign this divorce paper. Jonathan looked like he was on the verge of tears and glanced toward the back of the house. Then, as if summoning the last of his strength, he shouted,
Sarah, please come here. I need your help.
Even now, he was trying to get Sarah on his side. Come to think of it, despite all the commotion, Sarah hadn't shown herself yet. There was no response to Jonathan's calls at first, but he kept calling her name repeatedly. Finally, Sarah came down from the second floor, looking annoyed.
I've told you not to bother me. Just handle the divorce stuff with Mom on your own.
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know what to do anymore.
Jonathan had always depended on Sarah for everything. In his moment of desperation and panic, he instinctively turned to her for help. However, Sarah was a daughter who had been spoiled by Jonathan her entire life. There was no way she would step up just because he was in trouble. Then, perhaps wanting to avoid getting entangled in the mess, Sarah began voicing her own opinions.
Fine, but make sure this divorce doesn't affect my life. If the company finds out my parents divorced because Dad had an affair with the CEO's secretary, I'll lose my reputation.
What? Is that how you talk to your father who raised you?
Jonathan and Sarah quickly turned on each other, bickering furiously. Sarah's comment sparked an idea in my mind. That's it. If you don't agree to pay alimony and sign the divorce papers, I'll show the video to the CEO. At this, Jonathan and Sarah turned pale.
Wait, please don't do that.
Yes. If anyone finds out Dad had an affair with the secretary, I won't be able to show my face at work either.
Jonathan and Sarah began apologizing desperately. I exchanged a glance with Lucas and muttered, "What should we do?" Lucas, looking down at Jonathan, replied with a sarcastic tone,
Well, what should we do? If you sign the divorce papers and agree to pay alimony, we won't show the video to anyone.
Fine, I don't have a choice. For the sake of my job, I'll pay the alimony. Just don't show that video to anyone.
Jonathan agreed begrudgingly. Relieved that the situation was resolved, Sarah let out a smile.
If that's the case, make sure to call a cleaning service and have this house thoroughly cleaned. There's no way I'm staying in such a filthy place with you, Dad.
Oh, that won't be necessary. This house is being sold anyway. Sarah let out a gasp of surprise at my words. This house was built jointly under Jonathan's and my names after our marriage. Since we were divorcing, it would be subject to division of property, and I planned to sell the house and split the proceeds. When I explained this, Sarah suddenly burst into tears.
What? Then where am I supposed to live?
You're earning a good salary, Sarah. It's about time you started living on your own. At the mention of living alone, Sarah's face turned pale again.
No way. I can't live by myself. Who will wake me up in the morning? And as for food, I've always relied on Dad to either buy groceries or take me out to eat. I can't do anything on my own.
I was so exasperated I was at a loss for words. Even after I left, Sarah relied on Jonathan to wake her up, and she can't even shop for food herself. As her mother, I was stunned to realize just how spoiled she had become under Jonathan's indulgence. While Sarah sobbed, Jonathan tried to comfort her in a gentle tone.
Don't worry, Sarah. I'll find a nice apartment for us to live in together so you won't have to feel inconvenienced.
Jonathan stroked Sarah's head as he spoke. This seemed to cheer Sarah up, and she smiled warmly at Jonathan. But I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. and shouted at them like a thunderclap. Enough, both of you. Jonathan, don't you see that you've spoiled Sarah since she was a child? That's why she's grown into an adult who can't do anything on her own. And Sarah, if you keep depending on Jonathan like this, you'll never be able to get married. My harsh scolding left them both staring down at the floor. Lucas, taking the opportunity to drive the point home, added,
That's right. Even my friends used to complain about Sarah. Whenever they came over, they'd say she was selfish and unbearable. If you don't fix that spoiled attitude now, no guy will ever want to date you.
Sarah's face twisted in discomfort at Lucas' words. Even Jonathan, who had always doted on Sarah, looked genuinely concerned about her future for the first time. The two of them stood up. Then Jonathan spoke to Sarah in a gentle, instructive tone.
All right, Sarah. Let's find a place where you can live on your own. I'll help you find it, but after that, you'll need to handle things yourself.
Sarah nodded quietly. Once the two had calmed down, I handed Jonathan the divorce papers, and he signed them. Afterward, we agreed to discuss alimony and property division through our lawyers. With everything settled, Lucas and I left the house. I'm not sure if Sarah will truly be able to become independent, but that's something only she can decide for herself. Thinking this, I headed home with Lucas. After discussions through lawyers, I received $30,000 in alimony from Jonathan for his affair, finalized the division of assets, and our divorce was completed. For the time being, I plan to stay at Lucas' apartment. That said, I also have my dietitian's license, so I decided to look for a job and become independent. After all, having urged Sarah to stand on her own, I couldn't continue relying on Lucas forever. With this in mind, I started visiting employee services and studying toward a new goal. I quickly found a job and now work as a dietitian at a hospital. My days are filled with work and studying at night. Amidst this busy routine, I received a call from Jonathan on my phone. I wondered what he wanted after all this time and answered, only to hear his sniffling voice.
Monica, please help me.
What's wrong? Why are you calling so late at night? I was in the middle of studying and found it rather bothersome, but I asked what had happened anyway. Here's what Jonathan told me. He thought his affair with the CEO's secretary hadn't been exposed at work. However, after breaking things off with her at that restaurant, she started sharing details about their relationship with others in the company. Apparently, she was a favorite of the CEO and unlikely to face any serious repercussions. Instead, the CEO was furious at Jonathan for having a relationship with his trusted secretary. Jonathan was called into the CEO's office and immediately fired. Jonathan burst into tears on the spot, desperately apologizing. However, it seemed the CEO's decision was final. Jonathan lost his job because of his affair. The repercussions extended to Sarah, who worked at the same company. After moving out on her own, she had developed a habit of oversleeping and was frequently late for work. Naturally, this had already put her under scrutiny from her superiors. When rumors about her father's affair spread throughout the office, it made her work environment unbearable. Eventually, Sarah couldn't take it anymore and resigned voluntarily. Jonathan tearfully explained all of this over the phone, begging me to reconcile because he couldn't manage on his own anymore. He was probably hoping to rely on Lucas' income from working at a top-tier restaurant. However, I had no intention of getting back together with him, so I quickly replied, "I'm too busy to even think about reconciling. You should hurry up and find a job to support Sarah. You're good at spoiling her, aren't you?"
But It's nearly impossible to find a decent job at my age over 50. Please, I'm begging you to help me.
Jonathan protested, but I truly was busy and couldn't be bothered. Ignoring his pleas and tears, I hung up the phone. After that, I blocked both Jonathan and Sarah's numbers. I also informed Lucas to do the same. Jonathan and Sarah, unable to get in touch with me or Lucas. Desperate due to their struggles, the two eventually showed up uninvited at Lucas' restaurant. As soon as they saw Lucas, they launched into their usual apologies. The two seemed to have been jumping from job to job in search of work, but Jonathan was unable to get hired anywhere he wanted. The CEO of Jonathan's former company was well connected in the area, and word had spread to other companies that Jonathan had been fired due to his affair. Jonathan, with his naturally high pride, would get angry at his younger supervisors, cause conflicts, and repeatedly end up getting fired. Sarah, on the other hand, managed to find a job quickly. However, she was deemed unreliable without Jonathan by her side and couldn't keep her positions for long. She eventually took on part-time work as well, but it ended the same way. She was seen as unfit and quit soon after. That's why they came to Lucas, asking to start over as a family. They even begged him to hire them at the restaurant, with Jonathan saying he'd settle for washing dishes. Lucas wasn't in a position to make such decisions, so he referred the matter to his manager. The manager came out, listened, and told them the restaurant couldn't hire them. Dejected, Jonathan and Sarah left the restaurant. The next time I heard about them was on the local news. This time, the two of them went to the CEO secretary's apartment, accusing her of being responsible for Jonathan's dismissal and harassing her repeatedly. After doing this multiple times, she eventually reported them, and both of them were taken into custody. It's hard to imagine anyone else falling so far from a once privileged life. As for me, I passed the national exam to become a registered dietitian while continuing to work. I had been living at Lucas' place, but now I felt ready to stand on my own. With that in mind, I started looking for an apartment where I could live on my own, but Lucas tried to stop me, saying there was no need for me to move out. But I shook my head and replied, "I can't do that. You're getting married soon, and I don't want to be a burden to you and your wife." Yes, Lucas was about to marry the woman he'd been dating. The woman he's with is a wonderful person. That's why I want to stand on my own, so I can quietly watch over his happiness from a distance. When I explained my feelings to Lucas, he understood.
All right. But when I have kids, Mom, you'd better come over right away to hold your grandchild. We'll be waiting for you.
Lucas' words made me so happy. I've just turned 50. Looking forward to my grandchildren that will one day come, I made a vow to myself to continue on the path to independence.